Zebalot, Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
This is the Abracast. I'm your host, John Towers. This evening we were recording high on top of the mountain, shrouded in clouds, thunder and lightning bolt all around. If you stick around long enough up here, eventually you'll see the ass of God. Thank you for joining me this evening. We're continuing our exploration of Exodus, primarily using Ginsburg's awesome book. It's just an awesome book, Legends of the Jews. So I might have talked about this book before. I mean, I rely on it a lot, especially with these Old Testament episodes that we're doing. He recorded the Jewish oral tradition. So, like, he would wander around, I don't know where he's wandering around, Jewish neighborhood. He's wandering around Squirrel Hill with a tape recorder, getting people to tell him these stories, and he's committing them down. So just thinking about, like, all the little, the telephone game or something, like all the little tweaks and quirks that these things get put in, but I love these stories, and I do love this book. So enough of this. Let's get into this. This is, I mean, it's hard to say what the main event of Exodus is. I mean, there's so much crazy supernatural occult stuff in it. But we're creeping up on arguably the main event, which is the revelation of the Torah. They've been teasing it for quite some time. Sorry, here in this in the text. I mean, we've been doing a lot of Exodus episodes, bro. But here, in this episode, I like to call out, like, oh, here's God being like the God of time or the God of history and stuff. But just due to the nature of this part of the story, keep in mind that we've heard on this show sometimes to keep in mind that God, one of his main early aspects was that of a mountain god. And I've called that out in a few of these episodes, and specifically here, the way we're starting, and some other things that are going on here. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Let me purify myself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka. I have my Jihad here. Let me lube up before we start getting into this. Oh, sweet manna. the Gentiles refuse the Torah. The mountain on which God made his revelations bears 6 names. It's called Desert Sin because God there announced his commandments. It's called Desert Kadesh because Israel was sanctified there. Desert Kadmut because the pre-existing Torah was there revealed. The Desert Paran because Israel there was greatly multiplied. The Desert Sinai because the hatred of God against the heathens began there for the reasons that they would not accept the Torah. And for the same reason, God called Horah, because the annihilation of the heathens was there decreed by God. For the wrath of God against the heathens dates from their refusal to accept the Torah offered them. Before God gave Israel the Torah, he approached every tribe and nation, and he offered them the Torah. And hereafter, they might have no excuse to say, had the Holy One, blessed be he, desired to give us the Torah, we should have accepted it. He went to the children of Esau and said, will ye accept the Torah? They answered him, saying, what is written herein? And God answered to them, thou shalt not kill. Then they all said, wilt thou perchance to take from us the blessings with which our father Esau was blessed? For he was blessed with the words, by thy sword shalt thou live. We do not want to accept this Torah. Thereupon he went to the children of Lot and said, will ye accept the Torah? And they said, what is written therein? And he answered, thou shalt not commit unchastity. And they said, from unchastity do we spring. We do not want to accept this Torah. And then he went to the children of Ishmael and said to them, do ye want to accept this Torah? They said to him, what is written therein? And God answered, and he said, thou shalt not steal. The children of Ishmael said, wilt thou take from us the blessing of which our father was blessed? God promised him, his hand will be against every man. We do not want to accept thy Torah. Thence we went to all of the other nations who likewise rejected this Torah, saying, we cannot give up the law of our fathers. We do not want thy Torah. Give it to the people of Israel. Upon this he came to Israel and spoke to them. Will ye accept the Torah? And they said to him, what is written therein? And he answered, 613 commandments. They said, all that the Lord has spoken, will we do and be obedient. O Lord of the world. He continued, we act in accordance with thy commandments before thy were revealed to us. Jacob fulfilled the first of the 10 commandments by bidding his son put away strange gods that were amongst them. Abraham obeyed the commandment not to take the name of the Lord in vain. And he said, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord and most high God. Joseph fulfilled the commandments to remember the Sabbath and to keep it holy. And when his brothers came to him, he had everything for their welcome prepared for Friday. Isaac observed the law to honor his father and his mother. When he allowed Abraham to bind him on the altar as a sacrifice. Judah observed the commandment not to kill when he said to his brothers, what profit is it if we slay our own brother and concealed his blood? Joseph observed the law, thou shalt not commit adultery, when he repulsed the desire of the wife of Potiphar. The other sons of Jacob observed the commandments, thou shalt not steal, saying, how then should we steal out of the Lord's house of silver and gold? Abraham observed the commandment, "Thou shalt not bear false witness," for he was a true witness and borne witnesses before all the world that thou art the Lord of all creation. It was Abraham also who observed the last of the 10 commandments, "Thou shalt not covet," by saying, "I will not take from a thread even a shoe latchet." Now gather around, children, gather around the burning bush, and let me tell you the tale of the contest of mountains. While the nations and people were refusing to accept the Torah, the mountains among themselves were fighting for the honor of being chosen as the spot for the revelation. One mountain said, "Upon me shall the Shekinah of God rest, and mine shall be for his glory." Whereupon the other mountain replied, "Upon me shall the Shekinah rest, and mine shall be this glory." The mountain of Tabor said to the mountain of Hermon, "Upon me shall the Shekinah rest, mine shall be his glory." For in the times of old, when the days of Noah, the flood came over the earth, and all the mountains that were under the heavens were covered with water, whereas it did not reach my head, nay, not even my shoulder. All the earth was sunk under water, but I, the highest of mountains, towered high above the waters. Hence I am called upon to bear the Shekinah. Mount Hermon replied to Mount Tabor, "Upon me shall the Shekinah rest. I am the destined ones, for when Israel wished to pass through the Red Sea, it was I who enabled them to do so. For I settled down between the two shores of the sea, and they moved from one side to the other through my aid, so that not even their clothes became wet." Mount Carmel was quite silent, but settled down on the shore of the sea, thinking, "If the Shekinah is to repose on the sea, it'll rest upon me. And if it is to repose on the mainland, it will rest upon me." Then a voice out of the high heavens rang out and said, "The Shekinah shall not rest upon these high mountains that are so proud, for it is not God's will that the Shekinah should rest upon the mountains that quarrel amongst themselves and look upon one another with disdain. He prefers the low mountains and Sinai among these, because it is the smallest and most insignificant of all, and the easiest to climb. I would just add, upon it will he let the Shekinah rest." The other mountains hereupon said to God, "Is it possible that thou art partial and wilt give us no reward for our good intentions?" And God replied, "Because ye have striven in my honor, I will reward ye. Upon Tabor I will grant aid to Israel at the time of Deborah, and upon Carmel I will give aid to Elijah." I'm just going to stop and interject here that at this time, chronologically, underneath Mount Hermon is like 200 bound sex fiend angels bound in the darkness under Mount Hermon. This is the fallout and the final fate of the majority of the Watcher angels who came down to fuck the Earth chicks, man. It's always about the Earth chicks. Mount Sinai was one of them. The leader actually got suspended upside down the way that I interpret it is in orbit. If you go to Abracast.com, you can check out my tarot card deck. It's the Hanged Man is the leader of the Watcher Angels' final fate. Suspended upside down in orbit for eternity. Back to it. Mount Sinai was given the preference not for its humility alone, but also because upon it there had been no worshipping of idols. Whereas the other mountains, owing to their height, had been employed as sanctuaries by the idolaters, Mount Sinai has further significance too, for it had been originally part of Mount Moriah, on which Isaac was said to have been sacrificed. But Sinai separated itself from it, and it came to the desert, and God said, because the father Isaac laid upon this mountain, bound as a sacrifice, it is fitting that upon it his children receive the Torah. Hence God now chose from this mountain for a brief stay during the revelation. For after the Torah had been bestowed, he withdrew again to heaven. In the future world, Sinai will return to its original place, Mount Moriah, when the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills. Just as Sinai was chosen as a spot for the revelation owing to its humility, so likewise was Moses when God said to Moses, "Go deliver Israel." He, in his great humility, said, "Who am I that I go to Pharaoh and lead the children of God out of Egypt? There are nobler and wealthier than I." But God replied, "Thou art a great man, thee have I chosen out of all of Israel. Of thee shall the prophet of the future say, I have laid help upon one that is mighty. I have exalted on chosen out of the people." Moses, in his humility, however, stood apart and would not accept the office offered to him until God said to him, "Why dost thou stand apart? If they are not to be delivered by thee, by none other will they be delivered." When, likewise, at God's command, Moses had erected the tabernacle, he did not enter it out of great humility until God said to him, "Why does thou stand outside? Thou art worthy to serve me." So finally, the Torah is offered to Israel. On the second day of the third month, Moses received word from God to betake himself to Mount Sinai, for without this direct summons he would not have gone there. This time, as at all times, when God desired to speak to Moses, he twice called him by name. "Moses! Hey, dog! Hey, Moses!" And after he had answered, "Here I am," God's revelation to him followed when Moses had been carried to God in a cloud, which was always ready to bear him to God and to restore him to men. God said to him, "Go and acquaint the women of Israel with the principles of Judaism, and try with kindly words to persuade them to accept this Torah, but expound the full contents of the Torah to the men, and with them speak solemn words concerning it." There were several reasons for his going to the woman first, God said. "When I created the world, I gave my commandment concerning the forbidden fruit to Adam only, and not to his wife Eve, and this omission had effected that she tempted Adam to sin. Hence, it appears advisable that the women first hear my commandments, and the men will then follow their counsel. God furthermore knew that women were more scrupulous in their observances of religious precepts, and hence he first addressed himself to them. Then, too, God expected the women to instruct their children in the ways of the Torah, whereupon he sent his messenger first to them. The words that Moses was to address to the women as well as the men, to the Sanhedrin as well as to the people, were as follows, quote, "You yourselves have seen it, for it is from writings or through tradition or from the mouths of others that ye learn it, and what I did for you in Egypt. For although they were idolaters, slayers of men, men of lewd living, still I punished them. Not for these sins, but only for the wrong done to you. But ye will I carry on the wings of eagles, the days of the revelation at Sinai, and we will bring to me when the temple shall be erected, since I have wrought for you so many miracles. When before you have received the Torah and observed the laws, how many more miracles will I work for you? When you will have received the Torah and observed the laws, the beginning of all things is hard, but as soon as you will have grown accustomed to obedience, all else will be easy for you. If you will now observe the Abrahamic covenant, the Sabbath, the commandment against idolatry, then will you be my possession. For although everything belongs to me, Israel will be a special possession, because I led them out of Egypt and freed them from bondage. With respect to Israel, God is like the one who receives many fields as a heritage. But one he purchased himself, and the one he earned was dearest to his heart. I will reign alone over you as my possession, I and none other, so long as you keep yourselves aloof from other people. If not, other people shall reign over you. But if you obey me, you shall be a nation, not only free from care, but also a nation of priests and a holy nation. Unquote. If Israel had not sinned through worshiping the golden calf, there would be among them no caste of priests. The nation would have been a nation of priests, and it was only after their sin that the greater part of people had lost the right to priesthood. Now God instructed Moses to transmit to the people his word without adding to them or diminishing from them. In the precise order in the same tongue, the Hebrew, Moses hereupon betook himself to the people to deliver his message. Without first seeing his family, he first addressed the word of God to the elders, for he never forgot to honor due to the elders. Then, in a simple and well-arranged form, he repeated it to all the people, including the women, joyful of his own purpose, or his own impulse. Every Israelite declared himself willing to accept the Torah, whereupon Moses returned to God to inform him of the decision of the people. For although God, being omniscient, he had no need of hearing from Moses the answer of the people. Still, propriety demands that the one who sent on the message returns to make a report to his success to him who sent it. God hereupon said to Moses, I will come to thee in a thick cloud and repeat the 3 commandments that I gave thee on Moriah, so that thou tellest them may seem to the people as important as what they hear from me. But not only in thee shall they have faith, but also to the prophets and the sages that will come after thee. Moses then returned to the people once more and explained to them the serious effect that the disregard of law would have upon them. The first time he spoke to them about the Torah, he expounded its excellencies to them. The first time he spoke to them about the Torah, the excellencies to them, so as to introduce them to accept it. But now he spoke to them of the terrible punishments they would bring upon themselves if they did not observe the laws. The people did not, however, alter their resolution, but were full of joy in the expectation of receiving the Torah. They only wished Moses to voice to God their desire to hear him impart his words directly to them. So they said to Moses, we want to hear the words of our king from himself. They were not even content with this, but they wanted to see the divine presence, for hearing is not like seeing. God granted both their wishes and commanded Moses to tell them to prepare themselves during the next 2 days to receive the Torah. Just as one who's to be admitted to Judaism must first submit to the 3 ceremonies of circumcision, baptism, and sacrifice. So Israel did not receive the Torah until they had performed these 3 ceremonies. They had already undergone circumcision in Egypt. Baptism was imposed on them 2 days before the revelation on Mount Sinai. On the day preceding the revelation, Moses recorded in a book the covenant between Israel and their God, and on the morning of the day of revelation, sacrifices were offered as a strengthening of the covenant. As there were no priests at the time, the service was performed by the elders of Israel, who in spite of their age performed their duty with youthful vigor. Moses erected an altar on Mount Sinai, as well as the 12 memorial pillars, one for each tribe, and then bade them to bring bulls as a burnt offering and a peace offering. The blood of these animals was then separated exactly into 2 halves. This was attended to by the Archangel Michael, who guided Moses' hand and so conducted the separation of the blood, and there might not be a drop more in one half than in the other. And God said to Moses, sprinkle the 1/2 of the blood upon the people as a token that they will not barter my glory for the idols of other peoples, and sprinkle the other half on the altar as a token that I will not exchange them for any other nation. Moses did as he was bid, and lo, the miracle came to pass that the blood of the few animals sufficed to sprinkle every single Israelite. Before the covenant between God and Israel had been made, Moses read aloud to the people all of the Torah, and they might know exactly what they were taking upon themselves. The covenant was made a second time in the desert of Moab by Moses, and a third time by Joshua after the entrance into the promised land on the mountains of Gerizim and Ebal. Although the people had now clearly expressed a desire to accept the Torah, still God hesitated to give it to them, saying, shall I, without further ado, give you the Torah? Nay, bring me bondsmen that you will observe it, and then I will give you the Torah. And Israel said, O Lord of the world, our fathers are bondsmen for us, our fathers are my debtors. God said, your fathers are my debtors, and therefore not good bondsmen. Abraham said, shall I know it? And thus provided himself lacking in faith. Isaac loved Esau, whom I hated, and Jacob did not immediately upon his return from Paddan Aram keep his vows that he had made upon his way there. Bring me good bondsmen, and I will give you the Torah. And Israel said, our prophets shall be our bondsmen. And God said, I have claims against them, for like foxes in the desert they became your prophets. Bring me good bondsmen, and I will give you the Torah. And Israel said, we will give 3 our children as bondsmen. And then God said, well, then, these are good bondsmen, on whose bond I will give you the Torah. Hereupon the Israelites brought their wives with their babies at their breasts, and their pregnant wives, and God made the bodies of the pregnant women transparent as glass, and addressed to the children in the womb with these words, behold, I will give your fathers the Torah. Will you be surety for them that they will observe it? And these little babies answered, yea. And he furthermore said, I am your God. And they answered, yea. And he said, ye shall have no other gods. And they said, nay. In this wise, the children in the womb answered every commandment with yea, and every prohibition with nay. as it was with little children upon whose bond God gave his people the Torah, it comes to pass that many little children die when Israel does not observe the Torah. The revelation on Mount Sinai. From the first day of the third month to the day on which Israel arrived at Mount Sinai, a heavy cloud rested upon them. And everyone except Moses was forbidden to ascend the mountain. Yea, they durst not even stay near it, lest God smite those who pushed forward with hail or fiery arrows. The day of the revelation announced itself as an ominous day, even in the morning, for diverse rumblings sound from Mount Sinai, flashes of lightning accompanied by an ever-swelling peal of horns. Moved the people with mighty fear and trembling. God bent the heavens, moved the earth, and shook the bounds of the world, so that the depths trembled and the heavens grew frightened. His splendor passed through the four portals of fire, earthquake, storm, and hail. The kings of the earth trembled in their palaces, and they all came to the villain Balaam and asked him if God intended the same fate for them as for the generation of the floods. But Balaam said to them, O ye fools, the Holy One, blessed be he, has long since promised Noah never to again punish the world with a flood. The kings of the heathen, however, were not quieted, and furthermore said, God has indeed promised never again to bring the flood upon the world, but perhaps he now means to destroy it by means of fire. And Balaam said, Nay, God will not destroy the world either through fire or water. The commotion through the nature was caused through this only, that he is not about to bestow the Torah, the Torah upon his people. The Eternal will give strength unto his people. At this all the kings shouted, May the Eternal bless his people with peace. And each one quieted in spirit and went to his house. Just as the inhabitants of the earth were alarmed at the revelation, they believed the end of all time had arrived. So did the earth. She thought the resurrection of the dead was about to take place, and she would have to account for the blood of the slain that she had absorbed and for the bodies of the murdered whom she had covered. The earth was not calmed until she heard the first words of the Decalogue. Through the phenomenon were perceptible on Mount Sinai in the morning, God still did not reveal himself to the people until noon, for owing to the brevity of the summer nights and for the pleasantness of the morning sleep in summer, the people were still asleep when God had descended upon Mount Sinai. Moses betook himself to the encampment and awakened them with these words, Arise, arise from your sleep. The bridegroom is at hand and is waiting to lead his bride under the marriage canopy. Moses, at the head of the procession, hereupon threw the nation to his bridegroom God to Sinai, himself going up the mountain. He said to God, Announce thy words. The children were ready to obey him. These words of Moses rang out near the far for the occasion. His voice, when he repeated the words of God to the people, he had as much power as the divine voice that he heard. It was not indeed quiet for their own free will that Israel declared themselves ready to accept the Torah. For when the whole nation in two divisions, men and women, approached Sinai, God lifted up this mountain and held it over the heads of the people like a basket, saying to them, if you accept the Torah, it is well. Otherwise, you will find you gave under this mountain. They all burst into tears and poured out their hearts in contrition before God. And they said, all that the Lord hath said we will do and be obedient. Hardly had they uttered these words of submission to God when 120 myriads of angels descended and provided every Israelite with a crown and a girdle of glory, divine gifts, which they did not lose until they worshipped the golden calf. When the angels came down and took the gifts away from them, at the same time, these crowns and girdles of glory, heavenly radiance was shed over their faces, but they also they later lost through their sins. Only Moses retained it, whose face shone so brightly that even today a crack were made in his tomb. The light emanating from his corpse would be so powerful that it could not but destroy the world. After God had bestowed upon Israel these wonderful gifts, he wanted to proceed to the announcement of the Torah, but he did not desire to do so while Moses was with him, that the people might not say it was Moses who had spoken out of the cloud. Hence, he sought an excuse to be rid of him, and therefore said to Moses, go down and warn the people that they shall not press forward to see. For even if one of them were to be destroyed, the loss to me would be as great as if all creation had been destroyed. Bid Nabam and Abhu also, as well as the firstborn, they are to perform priestly duties. Beware that they do not press forward. Moses, however, desirous of remaining with God, replied, I have already warned the people to set bounds upon beyond which they might not venture. God thereupon said to Moses, go descend and call upon Aaron to come up with thee, but let him keep behind thee while the people do not move beyond their positions. Thou hast assigned them. Hardly had Moses left the mountain when God revealed the Torah to the people. This was the sixth revelation of God upon the earth since the creation of the world, the 10th and last to take place on the day of judgment. The heavens opened and Mount Sinai, freed from the earth, rose into the air so that its summit towards the heavens with a thick cloud covering the sides of it. It touched the feet of the divine throne, accompanying God. To one side appeared 22,000 angels with the divine throne accompanying God. On one side appeared the 20,000 angels with crowns for the Levites, the only tribe that remained true to God, while the rest worshipped the golden calf. On the second side were the 60 myriads, 3,550 angels, each bearing a crown of fire for each individual Israelite. Double its number of angels was on the third side, whereas the fourth side were simply innumerable. For God did not appear from one direction, but from all four simultaneously, which, however, did not prevent his glory from filling heaven as well as the earth. In spite of these innumerable hosts of angels, there was no crowding on Mount Sinai, no mob. There was room for all of the angels. And it appeared in honor of Israel that the Torah, the end of the Torah, they had, however, at the same time received the order to destroy Israel in case they intended to reject the Torah. This is where we're going to stop for this evening. I'm John Towers. This is the Abracast. We've been reading from Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews. If you want a little bit of context with this stuff, feel free to hit up Abracast.com. Check out the featured topic link. We have an extensive catalog of Genesis episodes, and we have a growing catalog of these Exodus episodes. So if you want to dive into them, do so. Check out, go to the storefront while you're there. Check out t-shirts, tarot cards, etc., etc. I'll let Hilla tell you all about it. See you soon.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books. Take control of your destiny. Understand your past. Put your present in context and know your future with a twist. Check out the Abracast Tarot Card Deck. Your body is your temple. So let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts. And other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes. More bonus audio. Additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com.